The letter fluttered to the floor, its words, "You'll pay for ruining us, Claire," burning in my mind as I stood in our apartment, surrounded by Ethan's half-packed boxes. The Asheville night was quiet outside, the Blue Ridge Mountains a dark silhouette through my window. But my heart was loud, a drumbeat of fear and defiance. I'd just taken back my life, exposed Ethan's affair with Lila, my best friend, and reclaimed the $40,000 he'd stolen from our joint savings. The judge's ruling at the charity run, the whispers of our small town, had felt like a quiet victory, a reclaiming of my strength. But this letter, slipped from Ethan's jacket, told me it wasn't over. Someone, Ethan, Lila, or someone I hadn't seen, was still out there, watching, waiting. I picked it up, my hands cold, and locked the door. The click loud in the silence. I wasn't safe. Not yet. I'm Claire Donovan, 34, with shoulder-length blonde hair I wear loose, my sundresses and cardigans soft against the chaos of my job as a pediatric nurse. I'm empathetic, maybe too trusting, with a warm smile that hides a stubborn streak. I didn't know I had until now. My apartment, small and cozy, is filled with thrift store finds. A quilt my mom made, a coffee mug with a chipped handle, the smell of lavender candles I light to unwind. I thought love was my anchor, that Ethan, my fiancé, was my forever. He was 36, broad-shouldered, a financial advisor with a grin that could charm anyone. But his charm hid greed, a need for a life bigger than the one we'd built. Lila, 33, my childhood friend, was a yoga instructor, her sleek ponytail and sharp eyes masking envy of my stability. Together, they'd planned to leave me, taking our savings for their new life, until I found their email and fought back. It started 3 weeks ago, late at night. Ethan asleep on the couch, his laptop open on our coffee table. I was checking wedding RSVPs, my hands trembling from a long shift at the hospital, when I saw the email from Lila, tucked in a folder labeled work. It was explicit, cruel, detailing their affair, their plan to transfer our savings, $40,000 we'd saved for a house, before our wedding. My heart stopped, my breath shallow as I read. The room's glow, candles, our shared quilt, turning cold. I thought of Ethan, his hand in mine at the farmer's market, promising forever. I thought of Lila, her laugh at my engagement party, her toast to our love, her arms around me like a sister. Shock hit first, a numb haze, then a raw burning pain, like my chest was caving in. I didn't wake Ethan, just closed the laptop, my hands shaking, and walked to the porch, the mountain air sharp, the stars too bright for the darkness inside me. I sat there, my bare feet cold on the wood, and remembered my dad, his voice when I was 10, sitting on our old porch swing. "You don't let people walk over you, Claire. You're tougher than you think." I'd laughed, my pigtails bouncing, thinking he was talking about school bullies, not the man I'd marry, the friend I'd loved like family. Now, his words were a lifeline, pulling me from the hurt. I went back inside, saved the email to my phone, and checked our bank account the next day. My fingers numb in the hospital break room, the smell of burnt coffee thick. Half our savings were gone, transferred to an account I didn't know. My pain turned to fury, a fire I hadn't known I had. I wasn't losing my future, not to them. I called Tara, a lawyer friend from nursing school, her voice steady over the phone as I told her everything. We met at a cafe in Asheville, the kind with mismatched mugs and folk music humming, and she said we could fight, file a civil suit for theft, but it'd mean airing my pain in a town that thrived on whispers. I nodded, my coffee untouched, my hands clenched under the table. I thought of my mom, her hands kneading dough when I was a kid, saying, Love's worth fighting for, Claire, but so are you. I was fighting for me now, for the life I'd built, bite by bite, shift by shift. I spent days gathering evidence, staying late at the hospital, my laptop glowing in the break room as I saved texts, bank records, even a voicemail Lila left Ethan, found on his phone when he was in the shower. Her voice, smug and sharp, talked about their money, their plans, and I felt the betrayal twist deeper, a knife I couldn't pull out. Sam, my co-worker, a gruff nurse with a soft spot for kids, noticed my red eyes, my quiet. He didn't pry, just handed me a coffee one morning, his hands steady, saying I didn't have to go through it alone. His kindness, the way he lingered, checking on me, was an anchor, reminding me I wasn't as broken as I felt. I confronted Ethan a week later after a shift, my hands shaking as I set the printed email on our kitchen table. The apartment smelled of the lasagna I'd made, a habit from happier days, but the air was heavy now, the candles unlit. He came home, his tie loose, and froze when he saw the paper. I asked why, my voice steady, my eyes locked on his. His face fell, his excuses weak, stress, confusion, Lila's influence. But I didn't flinch, just told him to leave, my hands clenched to hide the tremble. He packed a bag, his eyes avoiding mine, and walked out. The doors click final. I stood there, the lasagna cold, and felt the girl who'd trusted him slip away, replaced by someone harder, someone who wouldn't break. Lila avoided me. Her yoga studio closed when I drove by, her phone unanswered. I didn't need her words. Her betrayal was clear in the email, the voicemail, the money gone. I kept working, soothing kids through shots, smiling for parents, but my mind was on the fight. Tara built the case, her office a mess of legal pads and coffee cups, and said we had enough for court. The charity run, a community event we'd all planned, was my chance. I gave Tara the evidence, and she filed the suit, presenting it to a judge the day of the run. I stood in the crowd, my sundress soft against the mountain breeze, watching Ethan's face pale as the ruling came, account frozen, money returned, his reputation tanked. Lila was gone, her studio empty, the town whispering. I felt a quiet strength, not joy, but a reclaiming of my life, my trust in myself. As I packed Ethan's things that night, the letter fell from his jacket, unsigned, its words a threat. "You'll pay for ruining us, Claire." I stood there, the apartment dark, the mountains looming, and knew this wasn't over. I thought of Sam, his steady hand, my dad's voice, Mom's love. I locked the letter in a drawer, my hands cold, and walked to the porch, the stars bright, the air sharp. Someone was watching, and I had to be ready. I stood on the porch, the mountain air sharp against my skin, the letter's threat. "You'll pay for ruining us, Claire," looping in my head like a song I couldn't shake. The Asheville night was still, the Blue Ridge Mountains a dark curve against the stars, but I felt exposed, like eyes were on me from the shadows. I went back inside, locking the door. The click loud in my quiet apartment. The space felt smaller now. The quilt on the couch, the chipped mug on the counter, all reminders of a life I'd built with Ethan, now tainted by his betrayal with Lila. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter in my hands, its paper cheap but heavy, and wondered who'd written it. Ethan, bitter and cornered, Lila lashing out from wherever she'd fled, or someone else, someone I hadn't seen pulling strings. I thought of my dad, his voice steady when I was 12, fixing my bike in the garage. "You face what scares you, Claire. That's how you win." I wasn't sure what winning looked like anymore, but I wasn't running. I made tea, the kind Mom used to brew, chamomile with a hint of honey, the steam curling up as I sat, my hands wrapped around the mug. The letter stared at me from the table, its words a challenge I couldn't ignore. I pulled out my notebook, a worn thing I used for work schedules and grocery lists, and wrote down every detail: Ethan's excuses, Lila's voicemail, the bank transfer, the charity run. I added the letter, taping it inside, my hands steady, but my heart racing. I needed to know who was behind it, needed to protect the life I'd fought to reclaim. I thought of Sam, my co-worker, his gruff kindness, the way he'd handed me coffee when I was falling apart. I wanted to tell him, but I held back, not wanting to drag him into this mess. Instead, I called Tara, leaving a voicemail, my voice low, telling her about the letter, asking if she could trace it, maybe check Ethan's accounts for clues. Morning came, the Asheville sun soft through my window, the mountains glowing pink. I drove to the hospital, my scrubs soft against my skin, the smell of antiseptic and coffee grounding me as I started my shift. The pediatric ward was busy, kids giggling through checkups, parents weary but grateful. I soothed a boy through a shot, my hands gentle, my smile practiced. But my mind was on the letter, on Ethan's pale face at the run, on Lila's empty studio. Sam noticed, his eyes sharp as he passed me a chart, asking if I was okay, his voice low so the other nurses wouldn't hear. I nodded, handing him a bandage, but his hand lingered, steady, like he knew I was carrying something heavy. I wanted to tell him, but I smiled instead, saying I was just tired, and moved on, checking vitals, my heart a quiet storm. The lunch break gave me a moment to breathe, the break room's fluorescent lights harsh, the smell of burnt popcorn thick. I checked my phone, hoping for Tara's reply, but found nothing, just a text from Mom, asking me to visit. Her words warm but worried. I sipped my coffee, the mug warm, and thought of her, her hands kneading dough when I was a kid. Her voice so. You're enough, Claire. Just as you are. I'd believed her, built my life on love, on trust, and Ethan and Lila had shattered it. But I wasn't broken. Not anymore. I texted Tara, asking her to dig into Ethan's recent contacts, maybe Lila's too, and went back to work. My hands steady as I bandaged a scraped knee, my smile real for the first time in days. Tara called after my shift, her voice crackling through my car's speaker as I drove home, the mountains looming. She checked the letter, found no prints, but had news. Ethan had been emailing a man named Victor Klein, a private lender with a shady reputation, someone he'd met through Lila's yoga clients. My stomach twisted, the pieces clicking. Was Victor the one who'd written the letter, helping Ethan and Lila cover their tracks? Tara said she'd hired a PI to trace Victor, see if he was tied to the bank transfer or the threat. She warned me to be careful, her voice sharp, saying men like Victor didn't play nice. I thanked her, hung up, and pulled into my parking lot. The Asheville dusk settling, the air cool. I checked my rear view, half expecting a strange car, but the lot was empty, the quiet too heavy. I kept working, pouring myself into my patients, their small hands, their shy smiles. But I was careful now, locking my car, checking my apartment's windows, keeping my phone close. I visited Mom, needing her warmth, even if I couldn't tell her everything. She was in her kitchen, baking scones, the smell of butter and vanilla wrapping around me like a hug. She asked about Ethan, her eyes searching, and I said he was gone, keeping my voice soft, not mentioning the letter. I saw the worry in her hands, the way they trembled as she stirred batter, and remembered being 8, sitting on her counter, licking a spoon, her laugh soft as she said, "You'll find your way, Claire." I was trying, but the letter, Victor Klein, The shadow of Ethan and Lila. It was a weight I carried alone. I started noticing things. A man lingering at the hospital parking lot, his cap low, watching as I left my shift. A car following me too long on the mountain roads, its headlights dim but steady. I told myself I was paranoid, but I wrote down plates, kept my keys between my fingers, a trick Dad taught me when I got my first car. I confided in Sam. One evening after a shift, the hospital quiet, the smell of bleach faint. We were in the break room, sharing vending machine chips, and I told him about the letter, my voice low, my hands twisting. He listened, his eyes steady, and said I didn't have to face it alone, that he'd keep an eye out. His kindness, the way his hand brushed mine, was a lifeline, but I saw the worry in his frown, and I hated pulling him in. Tara's PI found something a week later. Victor Klein had lent Ethan money, a loan tied to the account where our savings had gone, a deal to fund Ethan and Lila's new life. The letter, Tara guessed, was Victor's way of protecting his investment, scaring me off before I dug deeper. My heart pounded, the hospital's hum fading as I listened, standing in the parking lot, the mountains dark. Tara said she'd take it to the police, build a case for harassment, maybe fraud, but we needed more. Proof Victor had sent the letter, proof he was watching me. I nodded into the phone, my scrubs damp with sweat, and drove home, my eyes flicking to the rear view. The fear real, but my resolve stronger. I kept my routine, working, smiling, soothing kids through fevers. But I was different, sharper, less willing to trust. I thought of Ethan, his grin, his promises, and felt the hurt shift to something colder, something focused. I thought of Lila, her laugh, her betrayal, and knew I didn't need her apology. I needed to be free. One night, as I locked my apartment, I saw the man again, across the street, his cap low, his cigarette glowing. My breath caught, but I didn't run. I stared, my keys in hand, daring him to move. He didn't. Just walked away, the shadow swallowing him. I went inside, my hands steady, and knew I had to end this. For me. For the life I'd fought for. I locked the door, my heart still racing from staring down the man in the cap, his cigarette's glow fading into the Asheville night. The apartment was quiet, the hum of the fridge a faint comfort, but the letter's threat, "You'll pay for ruining us, Claire," clung to me like damp air. I stood there, my keys biting into my palm, the smell of lavender from my candle faint, but grounding. Victor Klein, the lender Tara's PI had tied to Ethan, was real now. Not just a name, but a shadow. Maybe the one watching me. Maybe the one who'd left the letter. I thought of Dad, his hands steady as he fixed my bike when I was 12, his voice firm. "You face what scares you, Claire." I was facing it, but every step felt like walking a tightrope, the mountains outside my window looming, silent witnesses to my fight. I made coffee, the bitter smell pulling me back to mornings with Mom, her hands pouring me a cup when I was 16, saying, "You're tougher than you look, Claire." I needed that toughness now. I sat at my kitchen table, my notebook open, the letter taped inside, its words a challenge I couldn't ignore. I added Victor Klein's name, the PI's findings, the man in the cap, sketching a web of connections. Ethan, Lila, the stolen savings, the loan. My hands were steady, but my mind raced, piecing together a plan. Tara was working with the police, building a case, but I couldn't wait. Not with that man lingering, not with the fear creeping into my days. I texted Sam, asking him to meet me after my shift, needing his steady presence, his gruff kindness. I didn't tell him everything, just that I was shaken, but his reply, "I'm here, Claire, tomorrow," was enough to ease the knot in my chest. Morning came, the Asheville sun soft, the mountains glowing gold. I drove to the hospital, my scrubs soft, the routine of the pediatric ward a lifeline, kids with fevers, parents with tired smiles, the hum of monitors. I checked vitals, soothed a girl through a blood draw, my hands gentle, but my eyes kept drifting to the windows, watching the parking lot for that man, that cap. Sam caught me, his hand steady as he passed me a chart, asking if I'd slept. I shook my head, handing him a bandage, and said I'd tell him later, my voice low. His frown deepened, but he nodded, his presence a quiet anchor. I thought of Ethan, his grin at our engagement party, Lila's arm around me, and felt the hurt shift. Not gone, but quieter, replaced by a fire I was learning to trust. The lunch break was quick, the break room's fluorescent lights harsh, the smell of instant noodles thick. I checked my phone, finding a voicemail from Tara, her voice urgent. The PI had traced Victor Klein's loan to Ethan, confirmed through bank records, and found a burner phone linked to the same store where the letter's envelope was sold. It wasn't proof, but it was close, enough to push the police to question Victor. Tara said they'd called him in, but he was slippery, denying everything. His lawyer sharp. She told me to stay low, avoid poking around, but I heard the worry in her pause, like she knew I wouldn't listen. I texted her back, asking for the burner's number, my fingers trembling but my resolve hard. I wasn't poking. I was fighting, for the life I'd rebuilt, for the Claire who'd trusted too much but wouldn't break. I met Sam after my shift, at a diner off Biltmore Avenue, the kind with sticky booths and waitresses who called you hun. The smell of fried onions and coffee wrapped around us as we sat, his flannel shirt soft, his eyes searching mine. I told him about the letter, the man in the cap, Victor Klein, my voice low so the locals at the counter wouldn't hear. He listened, his hands wrapped around his mug, and said I was tougher than I gave myself credit for, but his frown said he was scared for me. He offered to drive by my place, keep an eye out, and I nodded, my coffee untouched, grateful for his steadiness, his care. I thought of Mom, her hands kneading dough, her voice when I was a kid. You find people who hold you up, Claire. Sam was one of them, and I held on to that, a light in the dark. I kept working, pouring myself into my patients, their small hands, their shy giggles, but I was careful, locking my car, checking my mirrors, avoiding late walks alone. I visited Mom, needing her, even if I couldn't tell her the whole truth. She was in her garden, pruning roses, her hands steady despite the years. She asked about Ethan, her eyes soft, and I said it was over, keeping the letter, the fear, locked away. I helped her plant bulbs, the earth cool under my fingers, and remembered being 10, digging beside her, her laugh warm as she said, "You make things grow, Claire." I was trying, but the threat, Victor Klein, the man in the cap, it was a weed I couldn't pull. Tara's PI found more a few days later. Victor had been at Lila's yoga studio before she left town, seen arguing with her, maybe over the loan. My heart skipped, the hospital's hum fading as I read Tara's email, standing in the break room, the smell of burnt coffee thick. Was Victor the one who'd sent the letter, protecting his money? Or was Lila still pulling strings, even from wherever she'd gone? Tara said the police were watching Victor, but we needed a confession, a link to the letter. I nodded into my phone, my scrubs damp with sweat, and decided to act, quietly, carefully. I remembered Dad, his hands on my bike, his voice firm. "You don't wait for trouble, Claire. You meet it." I was meeting it now. I started watching, noting every car that lingered, every face that stayed too long. I saw the man in the cap again, outside the hospital, his cigarette glowing as I left my shift. My breath caught, but I didn't run. I walked to my car, my keys between my fingers, and stared at him, my heart steady. He didn't move, just watched, then turned away, the shadows swallowing him. I drove home, my hands tight on the wheel, and called Tara, telling her about the man, the cap, the cigarette. She said the PI was close, had photos of Victor with a man matching that description, maybe a hired hand. My stomach twisted, the fear real, but my fire stronger. I wasn't waiting for Victor to strike. I was building a trap. I kept my routine, working, smiling, bandaging scraped knees. But I was different, sharper, less open, more guarded. I thought of Ethan, his promises, Lila's laugh, and felt the betrayal settle. Not gone, but quieter, a scar I could live with. One evening, as I locked my apartment, I found a note slipped under the door. Handwritten, no signature. "Stop digging, Claire, or you'll lose more than money." My heart pounded, but I didn't panic. I taped it into my notebook, my hands steady, and called Tara, my voice calm. The letter, the note, the man. They were Victor's moves, but I was ready to play mine, to end this for good. I stood in my apartment, the second note. "Stop digging, Claire, or you'll lose more than money," clutched in my hand, its words a cold weight against the warmth of the lavender candle flickering on my counter. The Asheville night was quiet outside, the Blue Ridge Mountains a dark silhouette, but I felt the press of unseen eyes, the same shadow that had followed me since the first letter fell from Ethan's jacket. Victor Klein, the lender tied to Ethan and Lila's betrayal, was real now, his name linked to the burner phone, the man in the cap, the notes. I taped the new note into my notebook, my hands steady, and locked the door, the click grounding me. I thought of my dad, his hands steady as he taught me to ride a bike when I was 10, his voice firm. "You fall, Claire. You get back up." I'd fallen. Ethan's affair, Lila's lies, the stolen savings. But I was up, fighting for the life I'd rebuilt, and I wasn't stopping now. I made tea, chamomile like Mom's, the steam curling as I sat at my kitchen table, my notebook open, the notes, emails, and bank records a map of my fight. Victor Klein wasn't just a lender. He was the muscle behind Ethan and Lila's plan, the one who'd funded their escape with my money, and now he was scared, his notes a desperate bid to keep me quiet. Tara, my lawyer, was close, her PI tying Victor to the threats, but we needed proof, something to nail him to the wall. I thought of Sam, his gruff kindness, the way he'd offered to watch my place, and felt a pang of gratitude, but also guilt. I didn't want him caught in this. I texted Tara, asking her to push the police, to use the burner phone, the photos of Victor's man. Anything to make him crack. Then I leaned back, the mug warm in my hands, and planned my next move, my heart steady, my fear a quiet hum I could control. Morning came, the Asheville sun soft, the mountains glowing pink. I drove to the hospital, my scrubs soft against my skin, the pediatric ward's chaos, kids giggling, monitors beeping, a rhythm I leaned into. I soothed a boy through a shot, my hands gentle, but my eyes scanned the windows, watching for the man in the cap. His cigarette glow burned into my memory. Sam caught me, his hand steady as he passed me a chart, asking if I'd heard from Tara. I nodded. My voice low, saying she was close, but I didn't tell him about the second note, not wanting to worry him. His frown deepened, his hand brushing mine, and I felt his care, a warmth that reminded me I wasn't alone. I thought of Mom, her hands pruning roses, her voice when I was a kid. You find people who hold you up, Claire. Sam was one, Tara another, and I held on to them, anchors in the storm. Tara called during my break, her voice sharp through the break room's hum, the smell of burnt coffee thick. The PI had found a witness, a barista at a cafe near Lila's old studio, who'd overheard Victor and Ethan arguing about money weeks before the charity run. The barista remembered Victor mentioning a loose end, me, and a plan to handle it. My stomach twisted, the pieces clicking. The notes, the man in the cap. They were Victor's way of handling me, scaring me off before I exposed him. Tara said the police had enough to bring Victor in again, this time for harassment, maybe conspiracy. She'd set a meeting with the sheriff, a man named Paul, who knew Asheville's underbelly, and needed me there with the notes, the emails, everything. I agreed, my coffee cold, my hands steady. I was ready to face Victor, to end this, for the Claire I'd been, and the one I was becoming. I kept working, bandaging scraped knees, smiling for parents. But I was careful, locking my car, checking my mirrors, avoiding dark streets. I visited Mom, needing her warmth, even if I couldn't tell her the whole truth. She was in her kitchen, baking cornbread, the smell wrapping around me like a hug. She asked about work, her eyes searching, and I said I was okay, keeping the notes, the fear, locked away. I helped her chop onions, the sting in my eyes a welcome distraction, and remembered being 12, sitting at this table, her hands steady as she taught me to knead dough, saying, "You make things grow, Claire, even through pain." I was growing now, through the hurt, the betrayal, into someone stronger, someone who wouldn't let Victor win. The meeting with Sheriff Paul was set for a Thursday. His office a small room smelling of leather and pine. I sat across from him, Tara beside me, the notes in my notebook on the table, their edges worn from my hands. I told him everything, Ethan's affair, Lila's lies, the stolen savings, Victor's loan, the letters, the man in the cap. Paul listened, his eyes sharp, his pen tapping, and said he'd known Victor's type, men who hid behind money and threats. He took the evidence, promised to push, but warned that Victor was slippery, his lawyer sharp. I nodded, my sundress soft against the chair, feeling a shift. Not triumph, but a quiet resolve. I was reclaiming my life, not just from Ethan and Lila, but from the fear Victor had tried to plant. The police moved fast, pulling Victor in the next day. Tara called, saying he'd cracked, admitted to the loan, the threats, claiming he'd only meant to scare me, protect his investment. The man in the cap, a hired hand named Joey, confirmed it, trading a deal for his testimony. My heart pounded, the hospital's hum fading as I listened, standing in the parking lot, the mountains dark. The police froze Victor's accounts, charged him with harassment, and were digging into his loans for fraud. Ethan was questioned, his excuses weak, his career in ruins. Lila, Tara heard, was in Charlotte, hiding, her name mud in Asheville. I thanked Tara, hung up, and drove home, the dusk settling, the air cool. I'd won, but the victory was bittersweet, a quiet strength tempered by the scars of what I'd lost. I kept my routine, working, soothing kids, smiling for Sam, who checked on me daily, his hand steady as he handed me coffee. I visited Mom, cooked with her, the smell of her kitchen pulling me back to simpler days. I thought of Ethan, his grin, Lila's laugh, and felt the hurt settle, a bruise I could live with. I started running again, the mountain trail's my refuge, my sneakers pounding the dirt, the air sharp in my lungs. I joined a book club, laughed with strangers, felt the Claire I'd been, warm, open, stirring, but wiser now, less quick to trust. One evening, months later, I was locking my apartment when I found a package on the doorstep. No name, just a small envelope with my initials. My breath caught, but I opened it. The mountains quiet around me. Inside was a letter from Ethan, handwritten, his words shaky. He was sorry, lost, starting over in Raleigh, begging forgiveness. With it was a photo, one I'd forgotten, a candid of us at the farmer's market, my smile wide, his arm around me. My throat tightened, tears burning as I traced the photo, the girl who'd loved him. I didn't forgive him. Not yet. But I felt a calm, a letting go. I burned the letter in my sink, the flames curling, the photo tucked away. A memory, not a chain. I stood on my porch, the stars bright, the mountains steady. I thought of Dad, his voice, his strength. I thought of Mom, Sam, Tara, the people who'd held me up. I'd lost love, trust, a piece of my heart. But I'd gained something. A fire that wouldn't fade. A life I'd fought for. A Claire who knew her worth. As I turned to go inside, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. A text. "You're stronger than I thought, Claire." My heart skipped, my hand on the door, the mountains looming. Maybe it was Victor, Joey, someone new. Maybe it was nothing. A glitch in the dark. I didn't reply. Just locked the door, my knife in my drawer, my resolve deep. I was ready, my roots firm, my fight far from over. I kept running, the trail's my own, the air sharp with promise. I cooked with Mom, laughed with Sam, planned a trip to see my brother in Durham, a new beginning. The hospital was home, the kids my heart, their small hands a reminder of why I fought. I stood in my apartment one night, the quilt soft, the candle lit, and felt Dad's presence, his laugh, his love. The threats were gone, the shadows quiet, but I was different, forged in pain, shaped by fire. I opened my window, the mountain breeze cool, and whispered to the stars, to Dad, to the Claire I'd been. I'm here. And I was. Whole, strong, mine.